Welcome to the Inside Track on Real Estate with the Decker team. And I'm Ken Decker, and today I've got a very special guest, Mark.
Hey.
Mark Granata. And Mark Granata is a realtor. You have a family history of real estate, right? You're kind of like the Decker team. Your dad was in real estate before you?
Yes.
So, taught you a lot?
Yeah, my dad was a realtor 1980. And it was from him that I learned some of the tricks of the trade, and I inherited the same genes, and here I am now.
Okay, well, great. And so, Mark, you've been working in real estate for about 11 years.
14.
14 years, sorry.
Yeah, actually,
I got that mixed up. 14 years, primarily Montreal area. Mm-hmm. And now you've moved to Ottawa, and you joined the Decker team.
Yes.
Yeah, awesome. So we're so delighted to have you here and supporting our clients, and also now bilingual.
Absolutely.
Totally French and English, which is great because the Decker team didn't have the French part of the equation, and now we do. Okay, so today's show is about the 10 most common things that an inspector is going to be looking at when you're buying a home. So it's good for buyers so that you can understand what an inspector is going to look for on your behalf, and great for sellers because sellers can preempt a lot of problems by actually going and looking through their home before they sell it and go, oh, this might be an issue for an inspector, or you can even have a pre-inspection done.
Exactly.
Where you spend, $400 or $500, you have an inspector come in, they'll list all the deficiencies of your home. And by the way, don't sit there and go, my home doesn't have any deficiencies, because my home has deficiencies, and your home probably has deficiencies, and you're buying a brand new home built, and it will have deficiencies when you move in.
Yes, nothing's perfect. Yeah, no. Absolutely.
And so an inspector's looking for things that are a major cost, and they'd say major is over $500 is typically what they're looking for, and things that are a major safety issue. So sometimes the safety issue is only, $20, $30 to fix it, but it'll be written down on the major side because it's a safety issue. And then while they're doing that, they're going to find some little stuff. And the little stuff is normally what a buyer will go, okay, I knew there'd be some little stuff. I'm going to fix those little things, right? So let's go through. We've got a list of 10 things, the top 10 things that inspectors check. They check a lot more, but defective plumbing would be the first thing.
Yeah, well, defective plumbing essentially is broken into two things, basically leaking or clogging. So leaking could be something that they can run certain tests to make sure that there's no water seeping into the walls or anything like that. And also they can check the pressure of the water in the house by flushing the toilet while running the shower or sink, and see if that pressure affects the flow of water when you flush the toilet. Clogging as well. If you hear a hissing sound or a running water sound, that could mean that you have undersized or oversized pipes in the house. So an inspector, more than you and I, would know how to listen or see these kind of problems before they become a problem for the next owner.
Okay. And I think with plumbing, I've also noticed lately is cast iron. Like in older homes, they have the old cast iron plumbing, which is your waste piping, and it will clog over time. It rusts, and really insurance companies now are asking that anything that's on a horizontal run that's cast iron be replaced with the ABS plastic, because it rusts and it will break through and it'll start leaking. And you don't want a sewage leak in your house. It's not one of the worst leaks to have in your home.
Yeah.
And then the other type of plumbing is your supply plumbing. Traditionally, it's been a lot of copper, but now we're seeing a lot of plastic. And there was a PEX piping. Have you ever run into a PEX issue?
PEX piping? No.
It's a plastic. It was used probably about 10, 14 years ago. One of the first plastic plumbing supplies that came out. And it had issues because mostly chlorination would make it brittle. And then it would break, especially if it had a bend on it.
Okay.
And so they ran into some issues, but now the plastic plumbing, most houses are being done in plastic plumbing supply, and it's fine. It's good stuff. So
Yeah, no rusting there.
no rusting. No
Yeah,
rusting
an inspector would. I've had inspections where the pressure was good. There's no leaking, but there was some brown water or reddish water. So the plumber, the inspector suggested that a plumber check out, and there was evidence of rust. So it's really important that this be looked at by an inspector, just to protect all parties involved, so that there's no surprises.
Okay, great. And then another thing that's very common, well, not very common, that does happen is a damp or a wet basement.
Yes. So basements, due to gravity, are basically the bottom of the house, where everything water wants to get to the bottom of any space. So basement, if not properly drained with a French drain around the basement, can have moisture constantly touching the surrounding foundation, and if there's a crack, then the water would infiltrate into the property. Mm-hmm. And to seal a crack could cost anywhere between $100 and $2,000. So you want to be able to have an inspector come down there, and he has a special tool, a humidity tool, to gauge how much moisture is in one area in relevance to another area. So if he sees too much of a discrepancy, that's a good sign that there's some sort of moisture or water infiltration in that corner.
And basements are naturally damp because they're cooler, especially in the summer. If you're running air conditioning, they're cooler. Moisture tends to condense where it's coldest. And so running a dehumidifier is a great idea in a basement to keep that dampness or the musty smell away, is to keep it dry. And really what they're looking for is a wet basement where there's a crack, like you say, or the water's penetrating through the foundation, because concrete is not water resistant, right? So generally there's either a membrane on the outside or tar finish. And the tar finish problem with those is 15, 20 years, the tar gets eaten away or eroded by bacterial action. And so it's not really there anymore. And also those, you talked about the French drain around the outside, the weeping tile that in the country is going to dump into a sump pump and then pump out to the ditch. In the city, it's connected to the storm sewer.
Yeah, and actually, God gave us a very good sensor for mold when we get into a basement and you feel a tickle in your throat, or you're constantly sort of kind of your lungs are rejecting something in the air. That's probably because there's some sort of a humidity there. So over humidity or mold. That's spores that are coming out. So that would be a good thing to speak to your inspector when inspecting.
Yeah, tentatively, some people have great noses for it. I can smell it fairly well. And it takes over 60% humidity for mold to be active. So for mold, you need a food source, so something organic that it can eat. You need moisture, and you need warmth.
Darkness too, to reproduce.
So in basements, sometimes even if your basement's just a little bit damp and you have a couch pushed up against the wall, you could get some surface mold happening because there's no air circulation. It's creating dampness there. And so that might, and the best thing to do for mold is if it's just a mild case of mold that was behind a piece of furniture or something, soapy water is the best thing to clean it, and then put a fan on so that it dries quickly after you wash it. And that's the best way to clean mold. Some people use bleach and stuff. Not a great idea. It's really bad, actually. Okay, so what about third item is they look at the electrical. They're looking for inadequate or undersized breakers or that kind of. Undersized breakers. Sorry.
Electrical is really one of the things that inspectors pay attention to, and a buyer should pay attention to, especially because it represents a fire hazard. So it's not insidious as mold, where it takes long to notice nor long to become problematic, where a fire hazard can be basically jeopardizing the safety of everybody involved. So older systems like fuse boxes you'll find in a lot of pre-70s homes. Those are not accepted by a lot of insurance companies because they're not as safe as the breakers that we see in today's homes. Also the amperage. So if you have jacuzzis and pools and several energy consuming appliances, the amperage of the property has to be adequate for all of those things to be used and consumed in the property.
So you're talking about the amperage supply, the supply amperage coming in. And insurance now wants basically 100 amps or greater. And we still see the odd old service where it's a 60 amp service. And most of the time the insurance company will give you a certain number of weeks to have that replaced and upgraded. And I think the fuse system was a good system. The problem was when they needed different size holes for the different amperage, but they made them all the same size. So when someone would be overloading a circuit and the fuse would blow all the time, they'd just take out a 15 amp and put a 20 amp so it doesn't blow. Well, that creates the problem.
Or a quarter.
Or some penny or something. Stick a penny in and screw it back.
Yeah. So that's why
how we burn down houses.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
It's
exactly
more
right.
with poor, but also we get I've found some electrical, where it's been a person that's done it themselves, and you go up in the attic and you see there's electrical wires just kind of dangling and they're connected with morettes, but they're not in an electrical box with a cover on it. They're just hanging there. Yeah. And that's the kind of stuff that can burn down a house.
Yeah, and that's actually one of the good points of unfinished basements. I had a client that was really, really set on getting a property with a finished basement, but the one they chose for other reasons was this property with an unfinished basement. And the inspector went down and he saw all the wiring. To you and me might look normal, but there wasn't the right amount of junction boxes where they should be. There was what you mentioned, spaghetti looking wiring everywhere. And the inspector saw a lot of nonconformities. And we were able to negotiate the cost of rewiring those junction boxes and wiring out of the sale, because it was an unexpected expense that was not imagined when we originally made the promise to purchase.
Right. So it's important. And the other thing in the electrical, they're going to check things like they get their little tester. They're going to check that plugs are grounded, that they're polarized properly, that the return is on the right pole.
Yeah. Because
a lot of plugs now, they don't have the extra ground. They're expecting the neutral to act like the ground. And so that's why one side's wider than the other, so you can't turn it over. It's got to go in the right way. And so if the plug's wired backwards, they're checking for that. They're checking for ground fault interrupter circuits for plugs near water, near sinks or tubs, that they'll throw if there's a slight ground. And so that's important stuff. And that's one of the things that comes under a safety issue, because if a GFI is not working right, ground fault circuit interrupter is not working right, it's a $29 fix at Home Depot or Home Hardware.
Major doesn't mean costly.
No.
That's a good example. So to go to a Home Hardware or a Home Depot and get a $29 or sometimes $20 GFI plug to replace a traditional plug, you don't even have to hire an electrician to do that. You can YouTube that and figure it out.
You can
yourself.
do it, or if you hired an electrician, it's probably $100 fix.
Yeah.
It's still relatively inexpensive.
Yeah.
So if you're just joining us on the Inside Track on Real Estate, I'm interviewing Mark Granata, and Mark is a realtor on the Decker team, and we're talking about the top 10 things that a home inspector is going to check out. So we finished plumbing, damp basement, electrical, and we're moving on to poor heating or cooling systems.
Yeah, an inspector, part of their mandate is to examine the type of heating system, identify the type of heating system for the house. Some houses have multiple types of heating systems, whether it's forced air and baseboard heating. The inspector will be able to detect if certain rooms are harder to heat, especially if you're inspecting. That's one of the good things of inspecting during the winter, is that usually if the house is lived in, he'll notice that some rooms are harder to heat than another. It could be the dampers, it could be the age of the furnace. So this is really important when buying a property in Canada, is making sure that the heating is adequate, and if it's not adequate, that the price reflect those type of repairs that need to be done.
Yeah, because a furnace is typically $4,000 to $6,000 now, $4,000 to $6,000, $2,000 to $3,000, $4,000 for air conditioning, depending on how big the home is. So we can be talking, between $7,000 and $10,000 to replace that system. So a lot of things they're looking for is, has it been maintained? How old is it? Where in its life cycle is it? If it's 15, 20 years old, well, expect in the next 3 to 5 years, you're probably going to change that furnace. And so it allows a buyer to budget and also maybe renegotiate if that was something they didn't or weren't aware of.
Or cancel and move on to another property that works out for them better.
Okay. Another one is the roof, the roofing system, right? Your shingles and that kind of thing, the things that keep the moisture away. They're going to check that.
Yeah, definitely. The roof shingles are something that you can see from the street sometimes, but some properties have flat roofs where they have tar and gravel. So you would like to have the inspector climb up there, and something that you and I wouldn't want to do is get on a ladder and climb these properties. But the inspectors are fantastic at looking at the surface of the roof and see if there's any curling of the shingles, and detect if there's any potential water infiltration through the ceiling, through the roof.
Yeah. And then another way is they go up in the attic and they look in the attic space, right? Because that's pretty telling when they get up in the attic. Yeah. So what kind of things are they looking for? What have you seen in attics that were a problem?
Well, we noticed that I have just a story where I was representing buyers, and the roof was 2014 roof. It was fairly new. And when we went into the...
For the shingles.
Yeah, for the shingles.
Shingles, okay.
Yeah, for the shingles were 2014. But we went into the attic, and we noticed that this property that was constructed in the 1960s had an insulation in the attic that was sort of the same kind of texture as a kitty litter. Okay. Yeah. And this was identified by the inspector as vermiculite. And vermiculite, for those who don't know, they can and sometimes have asbestos inside them. So we had it tested by a lab, and it was discovered that although the shingles were perfectly fine, the insulation in the attic had too high of a percentage of asbestos in the insulation. So the clients got a quotation, and it was about $7,000-8,000 to replace the insulation properly, because they had to get into hazmat suits and get. It's a really meticulous job. So that was a way that we were able to protect the buyers. And the sellers understood that they're going to run into that problem over and over again if they don't address it in the sale. So it was a great transaction for everybody.
Okay, good. And there's also in the attic space, the inspector can see if there was previous leaking or leaking now from staining on the wood or mold. Attic spaces are designed to be properly vented, and the eaves, typically the most common is an eave vent that goes up to the roof vent, the top. And sometimes people block those eaves, put the insulation too far out or whatever.
When the inspector pops his head into the attic, he has to see a little bit of light coming through those events, so that that means that it's not blocked, because the roof has to breathe. If it doesn't breathe, then it's a perfect cocktail for mold and moisture to develop.
And also, your shingle life will be drastically reduced if your attic space is too hot.
Yeah, that's a surprise for a lot of people. They think that rain and ice and snow is the enemy of roofs, but reality, it's heat. If you have it too insulated, like you said, you're actually cooking your shingles on top of the roof, and that could lead to premature curling. And what should last for 15 years will last 7 or 8 years because it's bad insulation.
It also costs you more money to cool your house in the summer because you got too hot a surface up there. And typically in the winter, it's the opposite. Like, you want it to be cool up there. You don't want a lot of heat getting into your attic, because that's when you're going to create mold and moisture problems and that kind of thing. Yeah, so really cool. All right, so rotting wood is another thing that they're looking for?
Yeah, rotting wood is a sign usually of water getting the wood being exposed to water. So some of the older houses, the wood is directly touching, let's say, concrete, and concrete can, like you said, is porous, and it can get wet and affect the wood, or a crack, or sometimes an infiltration of water from the roof that is hard to detect. Sort of, like I said, it's a little bit more insidious. It'll drip slowly year after year, and then cause the wood to lose its structure. So we more see this a lot in outdoor balconies, decks, sun decks that people have, where they're not properly treated, the wood, so they start deteriorating prematurely.
Wood frames around windows and things
yeah,
like
that's
that.
true.
Yeah. Okay, and then they're going to check masonry work, any kind of bricking, that kind of stuff. They're looking for spalding, and usually the mortar in between the bricks. They're looking that the pointing is good. That, one of the big ones. Have you seen houses where they fill the weep holes in the bottom?
Yes, big thing. I had an Asian client that is not from Canada, and he saw the weeping holes at the bottom of the bricks, and he wanted to cover them. He told the inspector he wanted to cover them. The inspector said, no, don't cover them. These are to let moisture and behind the brick breathe. So he thought it would be a way for insects to get in. So,
and it is.
Yeah.
And they actually have some, it's like brass, steel wool almost, but it's made out of brass. And they put a little bit of that in. It allows the air to still get through, but it prevents insects or mice or whatever from getting through those holes. So, and then structural foundation problems we talked about a little bit, but also structural where maybe they've cut a floor joist, or the roof truss is cracked, or something like that. They're looking for those major issues, like sag in the roof, or the walls being curved out or in. That's what the structural integrity of a property. I often tell my clients that, hey, if it's warm, it's dry, and it's solid, the rest is decoration. But structural integrity is there. If it's solid, it's a great thing. But when the inspector sees diagonal cracks, let's say on the masonry outside, or along door frames, a diagonal crack, or a few doors in certain parts of the house don't close properly, it could be a sign of humidity or swelling, normal seasonal change. But it could be a sign that there's some sort of a movement or shift in the building that you have to be aware of. Yeah, and sometimes it's tricky, because sometimes a settling crack can happen right when a property's built, and then it never goes anywhere ever again. And then there's ones that are moving and continue to move with frost changes and things like that. And those are the ones we want to really look for.
Yeah, and generally if an inspector does find suspect a structural problem, he might want to even engage or suggest the buyer hire a a structural engineer or expert or foundation expert to just really verify that it really is movement,
Right.
rather than just a speculation.
Okay, great. And then the last thing that they check are security, safety features of the house, things like locks, are the stairs the right distance and size, width, are they equal, are railings
Yeah.
there or secure, or is there hand railing? People, biggest thing, they take the hand railing off going down to the basement because they had to put some furniture down there and then they never put it back, right?
Yeah, well, that's one reason, but also there's a sort of Zen look that's popular now, where there's no railings and floating staircases and things like that. That look great fashion-wise, but they might not be as safe for toddlers or people that need to get up and down the stairs without any issues. So
Yeah.
you got to be careful of those things and those codes. And sometimes older buildings too were built when these norms of conformity were not established yet. So you want to at least be aware that they're there, or that they need to be addressed.
And where I see it a lot is on decks and railings and stuff for, back patios that people have built without a building permit. And they don't know the codes for the railings, or how high off the ground then it needs a railing, and how close the spindles have to be, and that kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
So that's the kind of things we run into. So it's great. I think the moral of the story is get an inspector.
Yes,
It's the
absolutely.
best $400 or $500 you're going to spend.
Yeah.
I think it's amazing. And now we're just going to talk about one of our great featured properties. This property is out on Prince of Wales Drive, so just a little bit south of Manotick exit off of Prince of Wales. So really 5-6 minutes to Barrhaven. It's on 5 acres, great country property. It's probably 100 years old, nice wood stove. You get that rich, warm feeling when you get the wood stove going. It's been upgraded. Really a great property. There was a barn that's been removed, so there's still some wood there to be removed and some concrete, which could be used for, parking of boats or whatever. But it's 5 acres. You can put a kennel on it. You could have a horse. You can do just about anything. So if you want more information on that, oh, and by the way, it's listed at $400,000, which is a great price for the Ottawa area. Just give us a call at 613-860-4663. That's 613-860-4663, and we'd love to help you with that. And if you have any questions about, a home inspection or anything that you've run into, things that maybe you're not even sure about on your house, and you go, well, should I fix that before I sell? Is that a maintenance issue? Just give us a call or send us an email, info@Decker-Team. I even have clients that take pictures of stuff and send it to me and say, hey, what should I do with this? Is it important? Should I fix it or what?
Feel free. Call the Decker-Team.
Yeah, exactly. So we're grateful that you joined us on the Inside Track on Real Estate, and we hope that you'll see and listen to us again. Thanks for joining us on the Inside Track on Real Estate. Bye for now.